After the family gathering, I found my bank account empty. My brother-in-law sneered, "We were desperate." With shaking hands, I grabbed my bag and said, "Then you won't be ready for what's coming next." As they chuckled, a thunderous crash ripped through the room. The door burst open and... The warm summer evening was filled with laughter and chatter, the kind of family gathering where everyone seemed to come together, sharing stories and memories. It was supposed to be a simple get-together, nothing more than a few drinks, some good food, and catching up with relatives I hadn't seen in a while. But things took a turn, something I never could have predicted. The evening started off like any other family gathering. My parents were busy in the kitchen preparing food, my cousins were playing cards, and the older folks sat around reminiscing about old times. The familiar sights, the sounds of laughter. It all felt like a moment suspended in time. Everything seemed normal, yet the uneasy knot in my stomach grew tighter as the evening went on. My brother-in-law, Daniel, was in his usual mood, smirking, making sly jokes, and throwing out comments about how money was tight and how life wasn't the same as it used to be. I didn't think much of it at first. He always had that attitude, never quite grasping the seriousness of things. But as I watched him, I couldn't help but feel like there was something off about the way he was acting. It was almost as if he was too comfortable, too in control for someone who claimed things were bad. But as the night wore on, I felt a strange unease settle in my chest. My wife, Amanda, seemed to be avoiding me. Whenever I tried to speak with her, she gave me short, distracted answers. At one point, she even excused herself to help in the kitchen when I asked her to join me for a drink. I thought it was just the stress of family, the typical dynamics of big gatherings, but deep down, something felt off. The way she avoided making eye contact, her nervous laughter, it wasn't like her at all. The evening passed in a blur, with the sounds of conversation and clinking glasses filling the air. But something inside me couldn't shake the feeling that all was not as it seemed. I kept looking around, half expecting someone to pull me aside and tell me there was something I needed to know, something hidden just beneath the surface. After dinner, the guests started to leave one by one. It was almost midnight and I was exhausted. My wife had already gone to bed. I decided to stay up for a while, finishing my drink and scrolling through my phone. I needed some time to unwind, to clear my head, but as I sat there in the dim light, something nagged at me. The peace I had felt earlier in the evening was gone, replaced by an unsettling feeling that lingered in the air. Then I saw it. A notification from my bank, a strange, almost haunting notification. Account balance, $0, 0 cents. My heart stopped. I tapped the screen again, just to be sure. But no, it wasn't a mistake. My savings, my entire account, was drained. Panic surged through my veins, and I immediately checked the transaction history. A series of large withdrawals. Withdrawals that I didn't recognize. They were all made in the last few hours, during the very time I was at that family gathering. My head spun, and I felt like I was going to be sick. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think straight. I stumbled to the bedroom shaking. I had to confront Amanda. I had to know what was going on. But when I stepped inside, she wasn't there. My heart raced even faster. I looked around, frantically searching for her. The bed was untouched, the room eerily still. Then I heard a voice, laughing, coming from downstairs. I rushed down to find Daniel and a few of the others standing in the living room, laughing, looking far too smug. They were all standing in a tight circle, their heads close together as if they were sharing a private joke. I was furious, my heart pounding in my chest. It was no longer just about the money. It was the betrayal, the realization that something far worse had been going on behind my back. I demanded, "What's going on? Why is my bank account empty?" Daniel turned, a grin spreading across his face, as if he'd been expecting this moment. He took a slow breath before speaking. "We were desperate," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. His words hit me like a slap to the face. I was stunned. "What do you mean desperate?" I stammered, trying to understand. "We needed the money," Daniel continued almost nonchalantly. It wasn't like we had any other choice. His tone was cold, dismissive. I felt the anger rising in me, boiling over, my fingers clenched into fists. You took money from my account? You stole from me? My voice cracked with disbelief. Your family, you— I did what had to be done, he interrupted, his sneer widening. You wouldn't understand. With shaking hands, I grabbed my bag, not caring for anything else at that moment. My mind was reeling, trying to comprehend the betrayal, the audacity of it all. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this go. Not now. Not ever. As I turned to leave, I looked over my shoulder and, through gritted teeth, I said, "Then you won't be ready for what's coming next." Their chuckles echoed in my ears as I walked out of the house, my mind filled with thoughts of revenge. But just as I reached the door, something else happened. A loud crash shattered the air, followed by the sound of splintering wood. The door suddenly burst open with an unnatural force, and everything around me seemed to freeze. My body tensed in anticipation. What was going on? The door flew open, and standing there in the middle of the doorway was none other than my old friend, Jeff. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood two large, intimidating men I didn't recognize. But what shocked me more than anything was the look on Jeff's face. His eyes were full of anger and something deeper, something darker. It was as if he wasn't the same man I had once known. "You're too late," Daniel sneered from across the room, his arms crossed, clearly unfazed by the chaos unfolding before him. But it was clear that my brother-in-law hadn't anticipated Jeff's arrival. The atmosphere in the room shifted from tension to something far more dangerous. I stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest. "What the hell is going on, Jeff?" Jeff glanced at the two men behind him and then back at me. "They're not the only ones who've been desperate," he said, his voice low but filled with a certain authority that I hadn't seen in him before. "I've been watching your brother-in-law for a while now, and I've seen the kind of people he's been dealing with. You were too trusting." I felt a sense of dread wash over me. Jeff had always been the type to keep things close to the vest, but seeing him here in this situation with these men, it made me realize just how far Daniel had gone. He wasn't just in financial trouble, he had dug a hole for himself that he could never get out of, and now, it seemed, I was caught in the crossfire. Jeff motioned for the men to step forward, and one of them pulled something out of his jacket, a briefcase. It landed with a thud on the floor. My eyes widened in confusion. The weight of it seemed to echo through the room. "What's that?" I asked, my voice shaky. "A warning," Jeff said, his words sharp and clear. "To Daniel and anyone else who might think they can get away with this." He paused, looking directly at me. "Your brother-in-law's involvement with some very dangerous people has put both of you at risk." The room was still. Daniel's face, once full of bravado, was now contorted in shock and fear. His eyes flickered nervously toward the briefcase, but he said nothing. His bravado was gone, replaced with a look of desperation that I had never seen in him before. The smug grin he had worn so often now seemed like a distant memory. "I never meant for you to get mixed up in this," Jeff continued, stepping closer. His voice softened slightly, but there was no mistaking the gravity of his words. "But you're in it now, and there's no going back. Your brother-in-law, he made his choices, and so did you. But you can still get out, before it's too late." I felt a cold chill creep down my spine. "What do you mean?" I whispered. "Your account wasn't just emptied for no reason," Jeff explained. "Daniel was using you as a pawn. Those withdrawals, they were part of a bigger scheme, a game he's been playing with people far more dangerous than you can imagine." Daniel remained silent, his face pale, but I could see the regret in his eyes. It was too late for him. And I couldn't help but wonder if it was too late for me too. The weight of Jeff's words sank in, and I realized just how deep this tangled web had become. I wasn't sure what to do next. Should I cut ties with my family entirely, or was there a way to escape this nightmare without losing everything? But the silence in the room was deafening, and I knew that whatever I decided, it wouldn't be easy. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was racing with everything Jeff had told me. It was hard to accept that my brother-in-law had been involved with people like that. But as I sat there, thinking through every detail, I realized that Jeff was right. I had been too trusting. I had let my guard down for far too long. I'd been blindsided by my own family, and the fact that Daniel, someone I had once considered my own, had orchestrated all this was a gut punch I couldn't shake. The weight of it pressed on me, keeping me up as the hours ticked by. My phone buzzed several times, texts from family, wondering why I hadn't answered their calls, asking if everything was all right. They had no idea. They were all still in the dark, unaware of the storm brewing behind closed doors. I couldn't bring myself to tell them. I was too angry, too ashamed of having let it all happen. The next morning, I received a call. It was from my bank. I didn't know what to expect, but I answered anyway. "I'm calling to inform you that your account has been frozen due to suspicious activity," the representative said, his voice cold and professional. "You may want to take immediate action to secure your funds." My stomach dropped. The blood drained from my face. This was no longer just about family betrayal. This was about survival, and I needed to act fast. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, clutching the phone tightly. "What exactly does that mean?" The representative explained that large, irregular withdrawals had been made from my account, far beyond anything I had authorized. It was a clear sign that someone had been siphoning funds from me, using my name to manipulate the system. My account was tied to a web of transactions that I didn't recognize. The cold dread that had begun creeping up my spine now spread throughout my body. It wasn't just Daniel's deceit. It was far bigger than that. Whoever he'd been working with, they had targeted me, pulling strings behind the scenes. My life, my finances, everything I'd worked for was being torn apart, piece by piece. I wasn't just a victim of his actions. I was now caught in something far deeper and far more dangerous. I called Jeff immediately, telling him everything that had happened since his visit the previous night. "You're not out of the woods yet," he said, his voice serious, "but we can fix this. I've got a plan." I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Jeff was always calm, always in control, but this time his tone was different. There was an edge to it, a sense of urgency that I hadn't heard before. "What do I need to do?" He outlined the steps, each more complicated than the last. It wasn't just about getting my money back. It was about making sure that whoever was behind this would pay for their betrayal, and that I wouldn't be left with the consequences of Daniel's reckless choices. And that's when I realized something I hadn't considered before. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about redemption. My future, my entire life, was hanging by a thread, and it was up to me to make the right choice.